Hey, welcome to Prelude to Ulysses. This is not a fever dream. This is still happening. I don't know why. I just got home from work and I'm feeling hot and sexy. Just kidding. That's not how I feel. Well, now I do. Cool. So, for those of you just joining us on this adventure, bad choice. Also, I wrote on this with permanent marker. You can get it off. It takes a lot of effort. So this is the Book of the Child. We're sorry, Prelude to Ulysses. Alex reads Ancient Evenings by Mailer Norman. We're on the Book of the Child, Part 8. Very unlikely we're going to get through very much of this. I'm hungry. I allow myself a lot less. I don't feel like talking about everything in this book. Like, I feel like I need to talk about shit in the other books. Does that make sense to you? I like it. I feel like it explains itself in a way that really requires very little. Well, it's a little confusing parts for sure here and there, but it really doesn't require guidance. My guidance. I don't even need to be here. I'm reading it for fun. And honestly, I don't think I would read it if it wasn't for you. You, my loyal viewer. So, it's taken us a pretty long time to read. But we're almost done. Oh no. No. Oh, there's so much more. It's gonna be 688 pages in this book. We're at page 168. So we're almost there. So what happened last time? I don't really remember, actually. Oh, yeah, everyone was just talking to the Pharaoh. I really like that chapter. He was kind of not even in the Pharaoh's head so much as just sitting and listening, which was, I don't know. Hi, honey, what's up? Yeah. I wish you would be a part of this. So he's just kind of chilling with the Pharaoh. The last thing, the officials were gone, and the Pharaoh was smiling. Come, little prince, he said, it is time for us to eat. And he took me by the hand while I felt the fatigue of his blood for all the long work of the afternoon. I have fun respect for the Pharaoh too. As far as being real with yourself is hard. It's hard for people to do. I just want this part of my hair to be bouncy. Like, this part's bouncy, but this is the part I need to be bouncy, right? It's never happened ever in my life. Let's just take a brief moment. Feels good too. Is it? See, it's just flat there. See that? This is where I want the bounce. Maybe it's where. Okay, let's quit. Let's quit fucking around, okay? Let's get to the progress of the book. 8. So just look at the red part. That's my point. On our walk through the gardens to the chamber where we would dine with the Pharaoh, my mother began to think of a conversation she did not wish to recall. Yet once commenced, there was nothing but to remember all of it. How could one not? A few days ago, my father, knowing how the news would chew on my mother's heart, had told her the Pharaoh said that Menenhedet ate the dung of bats. To which my mother replied, he takes it as a medicine. Only to hear my father reply, no, it is not so. He takes it for the contentment of his palate. The Pharaoh heard it most reliably from Khem-Usha. It was a long time ago, but he cannot get it out of his mind. I think that it is why there's been no invitation to Menenhedet for so long a time. Nor have I been invited, my mother could not restrain herself from saying. He would hardly think of you, said my father, without remembering Menenhedet. More recently, my father had begun to speak of Ptah Nem Hotep's interest in pigs. He talked about them constantly. Did you know, Ptah Nem Hotep would say, if a nobleman touches pig, he must go to the river immediately and with his clothes on, no matter how good they are. That's to wash off the taint. I have, good and great God, never touched the beast, said Nefkep Ochem. Who's Nefkep Ochem? I don't know that. That's his dad. I have heard that leprosy may be caused by drinking pig's milk. I never thought about milking a pig. Ugh! Hi, Lotus. I'd rather drink dog milk. No, I don't drink any milk. None. Zero milk. Fucking pig milk. They'd make that sound while you're milking them. Ooh. Okay. I have never touched the beast, said Nefkep Ochem. I have heard that leprosy might be caused by drinking pig's milk. No one I know has tried it, said Ptah Nem Hotep. He added, of course, it's not the sort of thing that would give your relative, Menenhedet, much pause, which my father made a point of telling my mother. Two days later, Ptah Nem Hotep was bemused again by the pig. I spoke to Kem Usha, he told Nefkep Ochem. As I suspected, it is true. Swineherds, on pain of the removal of their nose, are forbidden from entering any temple. How would you know, I asked Kem Usha, if they came in disguise? We would know, he told me. There is a priest for you. It is the perfect remark for a high priest. I'm confused. Who's Nefkep Ochem? Is that his dad? Oh, swineherds is a job, and they're not. Oh, this is the Pharaoh talking. Whatever. At this point, Ptah Nem Hotep took off his wig, handed it to Nefkep Ochem, inclined his head to receive another, studied the polished surface of his bronze mirror, or such at least was the view of my mother imagined, and then said to my father, okay, I'm going to celebrate the Feast of the Pig this year. At the look in my father's face, he added, yes, we will eat of pig's flesh. You and me, just like every other Egyptian at the fires in the market, guzzling on fat and tasty pieces. And yes, he paused, I've not had your family here in a long time. Let's have a small dinner that night. Tell Menenhedet, here, Ptah Nem Hotep gave his delicious smile, to bring one of his bats. It would give me great happiness, good God, if it were you to tell him. Greater happiness, good God, if it were you to tell him. Ptah Nem Hotep smiled. There'll be surprises. I wish to delight your wife and child on the night of the pig. So wait, he is recalling this out of his mother's memory. His mother's memory is of his father telling his mother this story. This happened days before. 2 days previous, maybe. I think. There'll be surprises, said Ptah Nem Hotep. I wish to delight your wife and child on the night of the pig. I did not know what to expect when my parents or great-grandfather gave a feast. We had many musicians who not only played at harps and lyres, but knew guitars and the cithara and the barbiton, and after the banquet would come many surprises. Jugglers would appear, acrobats and wrestlers. Acrobat dung. Bat. You get it? Never mind. And wrestlers. Skilled slaves would throw knives at painted wooden blocks, and once my great-grandfather even brought his guests down to the river, and there, by his embankment, boatmen decorated with colored ribbons and wearing feathered headdresses has used their oars like poles to try to knock each other into the water. A dangerous sport, I heard the guests whisper. In the excitement, a good boatman could be drowned. None perished that night, and my great-grandfather had salt sprinkled on the torches, so that we stood among fires of green and scarlet and in the midst of purple flames, while the din rolled back across the water. That had been a great feast. Tonight would not be the same. My mother said we would be only 5 for dinner. Still, the thought she passed to me was clear. Our Pharaoh, having given many lavish parties, would find more amusement in our small evening, where we might linger over the exquisite refinement and brilliance of his conversation. I could already hear her speaking like this to friends in days to come. Yet by the light in her eye, gleaming with marvels of anticipation, I knew she did not lie. The Feast of the Pig, no matter what my father had told her, was going to be wondrous. Excuse me. It was. On this night, I learned almost as soon as we began that I would eat food I'd never tasted before and hear conversation on topics unfamiliar to me. Indeed, I soon learned something on the secrets of purple contained in the snail, as well as how to put a letter in a dead person's hand, and was given hints of the virtues of cannibalism and much else again. As the dinner went on, and one strange food followed another into my stomach, my spirits played through perfumed fires, and my thoughts became inflamed. What my mother had told me about the hour I was made might as well have become a seed growing in the silence of my heart. The cheeks of my face were red. The conversation of my parents was I to look to Menenhedet, or Nefkem Ochem, as my father, Nefkep Ochem. That's what I thought. The conversation of my parents squirmed in my stomach like sun-heated snakes. I was feeling that wild merriment peculiar to childhood, when every moment can bring a new, incalculable pleasure, or as easily a clap of disaster. Cool. Since I could not begin to cry out with the uproar I would have liked to put forth, stimulation built upon fever in me, and I passed from hardly tasting the food to moments where I was trembling to recover from all the directions in which my senses were scattered by each flavor. We reclined to a low table of ebony, on which were golden plates, so thin they weighed less than my mother's alabaster. And the room was like a forest on fire, and lit by so many great candles it brought us near to feeling the presence of the sun in the middle of the night. Yet we were only inside a chamber of wood panels and a grain like the fur of a leopard. And I noticed the Pharaoh, having changed his costume, and another of pleated white linen, that left his chest bare. But I gotta go check this. Sorry about that, I had to run. I have a plumbing situation, specifically involving my washer. What's happening again? Fuck. Everything's alright, thanks for asking. Yeah, just a issue that needs to be looked at every once in a while. Okay, what are we talking about? Day one on an L. The wood looks like the fur of a leopard. Pharaoh costume. He changed into his costume from his costume to another of pleated white linen that left his chest bare, but for one shoulder. Wore less ornament than any of us, indeed. He wore no decoration except for a leopard's tail attached to the rear of his skirt. Furries, bro. They've been around forever, huh? Would you go to a furry party? I'll tell you what, I wouldn't go to a furry party dressed like this. I'll wear a fursuit. What kind of furry would you be? I asked a friend once what kind of furry he would be, and he said, lobster. Uh, that guy's funny as shit. Okay, let's just keep going, huh? Let's get started. That's my theme song. Fart, 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 fart. Okay. Jesus. This is really hard for me today. Oh yeah, he wore a leopard's tail attached to the rear of his skirt. He would reach about from time to time and catch the stem of this tail by his hand in order to thump the tip on the table, as though to indicate his excitement at something my mother or Menenhetta had said, and once in the high vigor of amusement with which he did this, having struck the tail several times on the table and flung it back with a whoop, for he seemed in as much a fever of laughter as myself. He succeeded in lashing that leopard's tail up into the middle of a great ostrich fan. What? On a stand behind his seat, and the fan tottered and would have fallen if a certain servant had not caught it. That's so funny. That's fucking weird, man. It's so weird that, like, no, I'm not saying I watch a lot of TV. I mean, I do, but it's not like new TV. But there's like all sorts of TV shows. Now, I think a lot of this is undoable, probably. But why would you not try to adapt this? This is wild. Fucking wild. I mean, despite, like, all the incestuous shit, could you do... I've never watched Game of Thrones, but that's all I've heard is it's just incestuous. So you could do this. Stylishly. I mean, it's so weird. Like, he is still blowing his grandpa in this part right now. He has been doing it for 100 pages, I think. But the thing is it's not just like he's blowing his great grandpa, which is gross and weird. No doubt. Don't have to talk to me about it. But he is experiencing the concept of empathy because his mom used to do that to his great grandpa, or like that like brought him. Oh my god, wait. If he ejaculates his soul when he died. Ooh, don't read too far into this. It's so weird. It's so fucking weird. Is his grandpa and his forced what's the word? Blowing of his great grandson, is this producing some kind of metaphysical cloning or something inside of himself? Because it might already be him. There were 2 little behind each of us, and 5 or more for the pharaoh. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Let me restate that. There were 2 behind each of us, servants, I'm guessing, and 5 or more for the pharaoh, and their murmur, life, health, strength, to every service they gave, whether to fill a goblet, remove a plate, serve a new plate, or present us with a little more of the same dish, became so consistent and reassuring as the sound of crickets in my family's garden. Again, I knew that all was safe, as at home, where I had come to know that I could sleep so long as the ringing of insects did not cease. For their onslaught upon the silence was nonetheless a sign that nothing was worse than it had been the night before. And therefore the power of sleep which hovered in the darkness could settle down again on me. So did I enjoy the constant smacking of the servants' lips, as if they would like to put themselves into the gusto of the flavors. Gusto? G-U-S-T-O? Who knows? You want to look it up? I do. What's gusto mean? With emphasis, with flair, not emphasis. But here's me doing something without gusto. Hi, my name's Alex. I work at Taco Bell. Here's me doing something with gusto. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a burrito enthusiast. See what I mean? Let's see if I'm right. Gummy, gumption. That's a good word. Gymnast, gussy. What's the word? Gusto. Gutta? What's gutta? One of a series of pendant ornaments. Conical ornaments. Wow, there's a lot. There's so many hard words in that. We're not going to get into it. Gusto. Gusto. It's a noun. Hearty or keen enjoyment, as in eating or drinking, or in action or in speech in general. Zest. It's the verbal sparkle fingers. Jazz hands, I mean. 2. Individual taste or liking. It's not to my gusto. That's fun. It's fun to learn with you guys. All of you. All 0 people who will watch this. Okay. There were snails to begin, not larger than any I had seen before, but with a sauce of onion and garlic and some green herbs so aromatic that I could smell the perfume of the Pharaoh's pines. I felt the herb ooze up my nose and leave the inside of my head agog with hollows. But then that was to be expected. My mother had told me that the name for all such herbs was ooze up, even as frying onions could be called ooze out when the smell traveled from room to room, and the red pepper was ooze spice to some and ooze in to others. Ooze in, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #2, Secret of the Ooze. That's how it's spelled, ooze, which we would think of as a liquid, but here it's a gas, a scent. I like the snails. We ate them on little pointed sticks of ivory with a tiny ruby on the end, shaped like a pharaoh's hat. What kind of a hat does a pharaoh wear? A little sailor hat? Black Panther hat? Probably one of those little guys who drives around in the little cars hats. More like that. What are those people called? Pharaohs. It's like they're wearing a bucket. The pharaoh hats. Okay, we're good. Don't worry about it. And cut with 5 small lines into the thin and precious stick were 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and a curved line for the mouth that did not look unlike the face of Ptah-nem-hotep, if his face had been very thin. A jest, I realized, a comic face for the pharaoh. Seeing my surprise, he said, "These are used only for the Feast of the Pig. Tonight you may laugh at me. Tonight is your night." "My night?" I felt bold enough to answer. "On the night of the Feast of the Pig, the youngest child of the princes comes first. Speak when you wish, dear child." Why do they keep calling him a prince? What's a prince? Is the pharaoh the king? I don't understand. I giggled. The meal was only begun, but the ooze up had cleared my head until I felt as old and wise as my great-grandfather. A great empty, wise head was what I felt between my ears, and the touch of the toothpick entering the shell and piercing the flesh of the snail made me feel like a warrior stepping forward into a cave where fires were burning, and the meat of the beast waited for the flash of my spear. You eat with the same utensil you kill with? No. "Do you like these snails?" asked Ptah-nem-hotep, and Knight of the Pig, or no? My parents replied instantly, both at once, to assure the good God that never had they tasted meat of the shell so succulent, to which Ptah-nem-hotep replied that the snails in the oval pond at the end of the Ramses II promenade in the long garden were carefully sheltered by date palms on one side from the sun. Yet the pond was open at night to the moon, and thereby were the snails bathed in moonlight. Perhaps that is why they were eminently flavored. "Yes, they are good. I would think that your servants might steal them," said my great-grandfather, even as a few more were laid on his plate. Ptah-nem-hotep shook his head. "The penalties are severe. Once a maid took a few, and my father had one of her nipples cut off. On any other night, my mother would probably not have spoken. But now she gasped. Surely you wouldn't do the same?" "I detest the thought. but expect I would have to enforce such punishment. For one snail, Hathfertiti persisted. I was a child at the time, said Don Imhotep. Yet I have not forgotten how my father opened his palm to show me the punishment. She was a young girl, and her nipple was no larger than my little fingernail. I was ready to blubber in misery, but my father merely flicked it off his finger into the pond. Later he told me such severe justice had been required to remove the pall of theft from the place. Pall. Alright, we're going to look up the word pall. P-A-L-L. I don't know what that word means. Listen, if you do, you're fucking smarter than me. Good for you. Shut the fuck up about it. P-A-L-L, P-A-L-L, T. Shall roll with. Prosthetics, pragmatism, poetry, pitch, pink. Pantheism? Pantheism is a noun. We're going to read pantheism. The doctrine that God is the transcendent reality of which the material world and humanity are only manifestations. Number 2, any religious belief or philosophical doctrine that identifies God with the universe. Pan. Doesn't sound very pan to me. That sounds monotheist. Right? This means that we are not even real. Who the fuck is going to pantheize something? Let's go to Paul. Paul! What was the sentence? To remove the pall of theft from the place. That's why they cut her nipple off. To remove the pall. So this is the second definition of pall. The second, P-O-L, is a verb. To have a wearying or tiresome effect. Number 2, to become distasteful or unpleasant. Oh, this is a pall. Appall. 3, to become satiated or cloyed with something. 4, to satiate or cloy. 5, to make dull, distasteful, or unpleasant. That was a pall of a fucking definition. Boring. Otherwise, the snails could have been sickened if you hadn't cut off the nipple. Pharaoh. I don't know who Ton-Imhotep's dad was, but honestly, if I saw someone do that, I'd be like, never hanging out with that person ever again. Snails could have been sickened. As you see, they're robust little creatures today, and oh, the lovely flavor of oil and onions and ooze up. I sometimes think I can't have enough. But then I'm just a poor fellow on the night of the pig. He gave a merry laugh that made his fine curved lips look as alive for an instant as the flash of a horse galloping by. Or was it a hawk coming down in a swoop? Animal and bird both raced through my head on the ooze up. I tried to look at my mother, but my eyes turned away from the boldness of the look she gave back to his eyes. Gotta look at the thing again. It's all good. Back into his eyes. If Ton-Imhotep carried no jewelry this night, my mother did not come near to doing the same. While she only wore a saffron-colored gown with no pleats, and only one strap so that her right breast, the larger and more beautiful, was exposed, and had colored her nipple red, I love that her boob's just out. A rose red from a rare scarlet. A rose red from a rare scarlet dye, of a madder root, I think, to match the narrow cloth of madder red she wore about her throat, in the style of a girl of the markets. She also wore a ring on every one of her nobly provocative fingers, and a light gold crown in the shape of a snake curled around her head, with 2 green gems for eyes. How beautiful did that look against her black hair and her dark, oiled shoulders. Now she turned her dark eyes on the pharaoh. Receiving the full bounty of her look, Amenhotep seemed pleased. "Menka, my pet," he said to me, "do you know the first duty?" Oh yeah, I forgot. He's called the Ka of his grandpa too. It's interesting. Menka. Menin-headed Ka. "Menka, my pet," he said to me, "do you know the first duty of a host?" "How could Menka know?" protested my mother. But I noticed she took the pharaoh's name for me, even though my pet name, until this moment, had always been Meni, M-E-N-I. "Menka," said Amenhotep, "the duty of a host is to amuse one's guests. So I wish to entertain you with an explanation of each dish set before us." He pointed to the empty shells on my plate. "As, for example, these little palaces." I nodded comfortably. Comfortably. What's that fucking word? How do you say that? Are you comfortable? I'm comfortably enough. Comfortably. That's not how it's spelled. Comfortably. God. I nodded comfortably. Damn it. I nodded comfortably. Comfortably. That's how you say that. Comfortably. Comfortably. I nodded comfortably. Comfortably. That's not how it's spelled. Comfortably. Are you comfortable? Comforter. Man, do I just talk dumb? Or am I real dumb in the brain? I nodded comfortably. You know what I meant. That's how you say it, right? Comfortably. Comfortably? Comfortably. Fuck, dude. I did not know. Woo! I nodded comfortably. I did not know what he meant, but it was the night of the pig, and everything made sense. "You're a deliciously intelligent boy," he said. "Now follow me with care, or I will cut off your nose." My father laughed at this remark. It was the first sound any of us had heard from him. "Yes," said the pharaoh, "I will cut off your nose and give it to your mother's husband." Not father. My father laughed prodigiously. Prodigious. Do you want to look up prodigiously? I think I'll forget it as soon as I look it up. Well, what's the other word you just looked up? Paul? What's a Paul mean? Distaste. Or something. Fuck, I'm dumb. It's okay. Prodigiously. My father laughed prodigiously. "Do you like the color of purple?" Amenhotep asked of me. I nodded again. "It is the color worn by kings of Syria and the Hittite kings, and some of the Hebrews, and many of the Assyrians. In Egypt, we think they are absurd in their passion for this color. There is even one town they fight over all the time. That is because the only good purple dye comes from there. Do you believe this?" I nodded. "It is the town of Tyre, Tyre, and famous for a spiny snail. The inside of the shell has a purple that makes a superb dye when crumbled into powder. In Tyre, therefore, everybody collects snails. Little girls and men half as old as your great-grandfather, which is old indeed, and midgets and giants all collect snails. They bring them in, and they crush them, and they pay no attention to the snail meat." "Why not?" I asked. "I don't know. Maybe they are tired of the taste. I suspect because it takes so long to pluck the meat out of each shell, and the dye is worth much more. They are too rich and greedy in Tyre, you see, to take the time. They just squash the snails between the stones, and wash them and squash them again until the purple begins to run. That purple settles in the vats and still has slimy little bits of snail left in it. My mother gave vent to one of her sounds of disgust. Let's recap what's going on so far. So they're sitting around. He's not wearing many clothes. He's just wearing a toga. They had talked about how earlier the pharaoh was mildly disgusted with Menenhedet, maybe, but he wanted him to bring the bat. Anyways, they're sitting around having some food. Our buddy Menka is feeling pretty comfortable here, which is nice. Nice to hear. And everything tastes good. The pharaoh is being silly. The pharaoh is eating pig, perhaps for the first time ever. That much is unclear. It's not a normal rich guy food, but it's the Night of the Pig, probably one of the festivals that you celebrate by eating pig. Currently, they're eating snails. The snails produce an aroma that you absorb into your brain. They call it ooze up. It's like the smell of, like, you ever like walk into a break room and like someone's cooking a hot pocket and it's like a minute, like it was in for 2 minutes, but it's like it's been in for like a minute and 55 seconds. You're like, take it out. You need to take it out now. It's perfect hot pocket. That's ooze up. Okay, and then the pharaoh is like notices that our hero Menka is looking at a toothpick or a skewer or a shish kebab that has on its handle something that slightly resembles the pharaoh, a caricature of the pharaoh. And the pharaoh's like, listen, dude, make fun of me as much as you want tonight. It's the Night of the Pig. This is for kids. I'm going to tell you a story about these snails. And he's like, what the fuck you talking about? And he's like, yeah, man, do you like the color purple? He's like, I fucking love the color purple, bitch. And the pharaoh's like, don't call me bitch. He's like, you said this night was for me. And then Menka gets on the table and he starts, I don't know what I was going to say. I was just lying. Talks about how in a nearby town of Tyre, it's known for its purple dye, which is made from crushed snail shells. And they just fucking throw the meat away because they don't care. It's all about the color. And his mom says, gross, boy. And then Pharaoh says, yes, it is revolting, said the Pharaoh. Yet they extract a purple that brings ecstasies to the eyes of Eastern monarchs. They call it royal purple. That is the color of kings, they say in the East. But we are wiser, and know it is the color of madmen. The Pharaoh roared in delight and thumped the leopard tail. I forgot about the leopard tail. Bring on the next dish, he said. His eyes were full of lights at the surprise on my face, when only one servant came back bringing 2 metal bars, not as long as my head, not as wide as 2 of my fingers, nor as thick as one, and Ta-Nem-Hotep set them apart on his lovely alabaster plate. Look at this, said Ta-Nem-Hotep. It is the black copper from heaven. He handed the plate to my great-grandfather. Menenhedet's dignity was too perfect, however, to allow him to serve his own curiosity. Quietly, he passed the plate to me. Let the boy have it first, he said. You will not know the pleasure you will miss, remarked Ta-Nem-Hotep. I, on my side, did not know how to touch this black copper from heaven. Was it warm or cold? My fingers flickered up to the surface of one bar, danced away. It felt like any other metal. Red copper, for example. I lifted the bar and laid it down. It was heavier than copper, and somehow I knew it was harder. I slid it about on the plate. Try both bars, said Menenhedet. Why do you tell him that? Why do you tell him that? Said Ta-Nem-Hotep. If all that my pharaoh wishes to show us can be found in one bar, he would not have them bring us 2. Ta-Nem-Otep nodded in approval, and I felt enough courage to pick up each piece by my separate hands. Then I smelled the first bar. It had a cold odor that came from far away. As I brought the other up to my cheek, I felt again this cold stirring into the breath I took into my nostrils. Some life like none I had known before began to tremble in the metal. It was as if I listened to the quivering of a heart in each piece. That life was in the tips of these small bars of metal as they came near my nostril. And then I cried out in fright and in joy, for I heard the gods speak. Their silent command must have been uttered since the two pieces of black copper from heaven pulled my hands apart and met with a click. They were married, now stuck to each other, although there was nothing to keep them together, I could see. My father took both of them from me on the instant, and was then obliged to surrender his prize to Menenhette. Nefertiti cried out with delight as she watched. "You are a magician," she murmured to Ta-Nem-Otep. "I do nothing," he said. "The magic is in the metal itself." "But where does black copper from heaven come from?" she asked. A shepherd saw a ball of fire fall through the sky. It lay in the desert like a dead horse. He found it too heavy to move, but there were ragged pieces he could break off. These bars have been made from those pieces. Who knows what speaks in them? "Can you silence their force?" asked Menenhette. "For a time, these bars had to be heated in order to be beaten into shape. Then they were inert. But when an unshaped piece of black copper from heaven, which came from the same ball of fire, was laid next to our bar, and the two were kept together, why, like members of a family, they must have prayed in the same direction. I can tell you that the bar gained such life from the rough piece, it can now give life to other pieces that have been beaten." That was a weird sentence. "I can now tell you now that the bar gained such life from the rough piece, it can now give life to other pieces that have been beaten." There's a failure in that sentence. Probably my own. I don't know what. Whatever. They went on speaking of peculiarities of black copper. Ta-Nem-Hotep told how a drop of water left on the bar dried with an orange-red spot. The water had not turned to blood, however. It was rather that the surface of the black copper changed into a weaker red copper powder that could be scraped from the bar. Who could comprehend why the gods desired that? I ceased to listen. I had heard about the gods every day of my life, and I had seen them everywhere. In the tail of a cat, for instance, since only a cat can listen with her tail. Fun. I saw a god in the eye of a horse when it galloped by, and the same god was in every beetle, for their movements were faster than my thoughts. There was certainly a god in any cow. I love cows. Where else could one come close to such a powerful knowledge of peace? There were gods in flowers, in trees, and the gods could always be found in statues, for their strength could rest in the stone. There was even a god in the wild boar. I could feel the god set and know proper respect for his wrath when I smelled the wild boar in its cage. Such gods were, however, not so frightening to me as this black copper from heaven, which moved past my nose. I had come near a god, or was it two gods, who lived between the flash of lightning and the silence before thunder, and I was not at ease. My stomach still shivered from the touch of one metal on the other, yet I felt hungry. Now the servants returned with a small purple fruit for each of us. That is, I thought it was a fruit. But as it was set down in its small golden bowl, I saw it was a cabbage instead, a purple cabbage. I did not know there was such, and it smelled very sour. "Beware of the vinegar," said Ta-Nem-Otep. "That is sour enough to give wrinkles to the mouth, but perfect for clearing your thoughts of the ooze-up." He raised his cabbage and took a bite from it as if it were a pomegranate. "A dreadful food," he commented. I don't know. "Why do you serve it?" asked Nefertiti. "Pigs thrive on cabbage. I thought we should acquaint ourselves with the habits of the friend we shall soon meet." Now he played with a few leaves. "Actually," he said, This is superior vinegar, and made from the best of my wine. I like a good vinegar, don't you? Yes, said my father. No, said Hathfertiti. Small reason for you to like it, Tanem-Otep stated. Vinegar appeals to us, to those who are full of pity for themselves. How can that be so? Asked my mother. It speaks of its disappointments. Just think of some poor wine that nobody drinks. It is obliged to sit in its jar until boredom makes it sour. What fury I taste in such vinegar. I love vinegar. That's like my favorite. I love vinegar. I love it. I love vinegar. Okay? You have a fine palate, remarked my great-grandfather. An exceptional palate. I have a talent for eating. No, not for eating. For tasting. Here, take this cabbage away. It's sluttish. Oh, sluttish. That's a word? Oh. You are in an exceptional spirit tonight, said Hathfertiti. I am like this once a year. Do once a year. Once a year, my father said devoutly. Do you enjoy the vinegar? Asked